The United States' decline in democracy under Trump 2.0 is not only the largest regression on democracy in American history, by far.
From Interfaith Alliance, this is The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet. I'm Interfaith Alliance President, Reverend Paul Brandeis Raushenbush in New York City.
It is also almost the most dramatic decline in such a short period that we have ever witnessed in a democracy.
I've already mentioned it in a couple conversations here on the show. A prestigious global institute has downgraded American democracy in their annual report, suggesting that we no longer qualify as a, quote, liberal democracy. The headline is shocking, and this week we'll get into the evidence and the details of the analysis from the V-Dem Institute in Sweden with founder Dr. Staffan Lindberg. Make sure you listen to the end of the show because Staffan reveals how courage shows up to turn a democracy from backsliding to pro-democracy movement. Each one of us has a role to play. We need these voices to be heard now more than ever, so make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform. Taking a minute to do those things really helps other people discover our show and become listeners too. Our library of past conversations includes over 150 hopeful, empowering, and inspiring interviews with guests like Imam Abdullah Antepli, Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum, Bishop William Barber, and many, many others. You can help us grow The State of Belief with a financial contribution right now. Find out how at stateofbelief.com. And you can support and join the work of Interfaith Alliance at interfaithalliance.org. We need every one of you. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know what I'm going to be doing this week. I'm going to be in Texas, and I'm going to be at Baylor University, where Turning Point USA is hosting one of their big rallies at Baylor University, which is a large Baptist university in Waco, Texas. I have an affinity for Baylor. My sister married an amazing Baylor football player. I've been really close to a lot of Baylor graduates and been so impressed with the intellectual rigor that comes out of many of the Baylor community. One of the challenges with Baylor, and that has been ongoing, is that they have a really restrictive attitude around LGBTQ advocacy and the thought that people can actually be both Christian and adhere to the Baptist heritage of Baylor and a member of the LGBTQ community. Well, I'm going, and I'm going to be joined by Kelly Robinson, who's the head of the Human Rights Campaign, and we're doing some alternative program to Turning Point at Baylor on April 22nd. It's becoming kind of a big deal because the both of us were both people of faith who also are people who are in same-sex marriages and who identify with the LGBTQ community and are advocates for the LGBTQ community. And so that's kind of a first for Baylor, and it's causing a lot of controversy, but it feels really important, especially for the students on campus who organized, and a wide variety of students who organized in order to invite us onto campus to have a program where we can talk about, where Kelly Robinson is going to be talking about her advocacy and why it's so important. I'm going to be leading kind of an interfaith vigil prayer, a joyful opportunity to talk about, what it means to be a neighbor. The name of our program is All Our Neighbors. So it's all and then A-R-E, neighbors, meaning like we're staking a claim that everyone is a neighbor. And, I've mentioned the Rabbi Prince thing that he said at the 1963 incredible March on Washington, which was that neighbor is not a geographical concept, it's a moral imperative. And so that's what we're going to be showing up for. I just invite you, if you're a praying person, pray for me or send me good vibes, whatever you like to do. It's going to be massive, and I look forward to telling you more about it next week. And now to my guest, Staffan I. Lindberg, founded the V-Dem Institute, based at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden in 2012. An independent research organization, it serves as the headquarters for the University of Gothenburg, Sweden's Varieties of Democracy, V-Dem project, which is one of the world's largest social science data collection initiatives focused on democracy. Researchers at the V-Dem Institute publish an annual global democracy report, and the 2026 edition is ominously titled Unraveling the Democratic Era. It has a question mark at the end of it, so that maybe that's a good sign. For the answer to that question and much more, I'd like to welcome V-Dem Institute founder, political science, Dr. Staffan Lindberg, who's one of the principal investigators of this and previous reports. So, Staffan, welcome to the State of Belief.
Thank you for having me.
Listen, you're beaming in all the way from Sweden. We really appreciate it, and I'm really eager, of course, to get into, how this report, understands data, how we decide what a democracy is, and all of those things. I want to start with at least the lead that's, really reverberating in this country, which is what happened in Hungary. At the election recently, and 16 years of Viktor Orban's kind of what seemed to be, complete, white-knuckle grasp on control and power in that, quote-unquote democracy came to an end. I mean, how do you understand this moment as someone who really looks at democracy and all the intricacies of it? What was your reaction?
I was a bit surprised, to tell you the truth, not the least that Viktor Orban and Fidesz gave in so early in the evening, and accepted defeat. I wasn't sure about that because they have a lot to lose after these 16 years that you mentioned in power. Enormous grab on the economy, on media, suppression of civil society, control over universities. You can go down the line, and by all accounts, also increasingly very corrupt and enriching themselves. So I wasn't sure that they were going to leave, but they are seemingly. So that's good news, and it's a terrific news for I think all pro-democratic parties, leaders, movements, groups, individuals, that such an entrenched electoral authoritarian government could be unseated by way of elections. And that is an important point, right? We've seen it happen before in countries like Zambia, and there are a host of other examples, but to a lot of people, it seems like, well, then wasn't it a democracy if, the opposition could win? No, not necessarily, right? If like in Hungary, you do a ground game that's strong enough to mobilize such a big portion of the population to we are fed up, and use that election to sort of overwhelm the system. You can even turn that kind of authoritarian regime that continues to hold multi-party elections, you can turn it over. You can break.
That was what was really important, I think, for Americans watching to understand that, we talk about gerrymandering here. The election there was really so tilted in favor of Orban that it really had to be a massive sort of outpouring in order to overwhelm what was inherent in the system to make him win, right? I mean, that's part of what, I think for us lay people, we kind of think, okay, democracy equals elections. They held elections. Oh, well, our guy lost and the authoritarian won, but that's just the will of the people. No, it's not always that way, because sometimes they actually create, and we've seen that going on in our own country, where all of a sudden, Trump says to Texas, give me 5 more seats, and they immediately give him 5 more seats for Congress. So I think it's important, to understand what the enormity of what happened in Hungary, which was that people just overwhelmed what you said, which was what the inherent disadvantage in the system.
Yeah, yeah. It's, I mean, it is really important to say. Actually, what we call electoral authoritarian regimes are authoritarian regimes that try to look like democracies,
Yeah.
um, hold multi-party elections, at least on paper, right? But to a certain degree, allow opposition parties and some amount of freedoms and all that. But you keep and hold on power by other means. You don't do away with elections. You don't
Yeah.
necessarily cheat with the elections directly, like ballot box stuffing or change the numbers kind of thing. So it can be technically clean elections. I mean, even the elections in Russia today
Yeah.
are multi-party.
Right.
There are quote unquote opposition parties in the legislature, and the conduct of the elections on election day and vote counting, they are, technically okay,
Right.
right? That doesn't make you a democracy.
Yeah. Right.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. It
Yeah.
it doesn't, right? And
Yeah.
the same for Hungary, but to a sort of lesser degree than in Putin's Russia. But
In our states, I mean, in individual states, there are, my home state of Wisconsin had such a gerrymandered internal to Wisconsin that even if, for instance, Democrats got a majority, there was no way they were going to win the state house or the state senate. It was just impossible. They'd have to get something like 70% of the vote. And I think that's what you're really talking about, is like almost inherent in the system.
that's one aspect. Now, I should say that the rest of the world has, for a long time, looked upon the American gerrymandering, and that it's been okayed by the Supreme Court and all that, as very strange
Yeah.
and kind of not really democratic, right? You don't see that to the same extent or even near the same extent anywhere else, except now we saw it in Hungary, but it in this election backfired actually on Orban and Fidesz.
Just in the backfiring sense, like I think even with Texas, we're already seeing that what they thought were sure areas with Latino voters are no longer sure for what they anticipated. But you mentioned something that I think is super important, because I have an 11-year-old son who is a total political maven, and he's just all in. And he was watching the election in Hungary really closely, and I said, "Oh, the opposition won. The opposition won." And he said, "No, no, not until he concedes." And I said, "No, he conceded." And he said, "He did?" And I mean, if my 11-year-old son was shocked by the concession, and that was early, that was fairly early. And we're in a country where our current president has still not conceded to a loss that happened now 6 years ago. But that concession, what were your impressions of that? Because it seems like Viktor Orban had two choices. I can fight this to the end, or I can just say, okay, we're gonna live to fight another day. What's your perspective on that?
So every authoritarian ruler at that point has, as you say, two choices, kind of, right? You can accept defeat and leave the scene, go and lick your wounds, try and make sure that the damage, or do damage control, basically, like I heard they did today at the foreign ministry in Hungary, emptying the shelves and archives and throwing them into shredders, right?
Uh-huh. Ah.
Um,
Yeah.
so you can try and, do damage control. The other option is to fight, as you say, and then uh, the famous political scientist Robert Dahl, already in 1971, in a book called Polyarchy, um, it's about democracy, and the he formulated like this: they would give in to democracy or democratization when the cost of oppression is higher than the cost of toleration.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's interesting.
So
Yeah.
now, like uh, Orban and Fidesz, okay, there will be damage, but the cost of us going in here with oppression to stay in power would be unacceptable to us, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, autocrats have different levels.
Yeah.
So if you look at a country like say, Zimbabwe in 2001, when a similar situation was, right, and he was just like, no, I don't care. And
Yeah.
but he also had the grip of the military and secret police and the regular police, and just beat up demonstrators, kill them, throw them in jail, right? Some are willing to do that. Orban was not.
Uh-huh.
Now, also a very different relationship to the military forces that he could not command on his own,
Yeah.
like you could
Yeah.
do in the US. And it's not clear whether the regular police and secret police, how far they would be willing to go, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And you have similar situations in other countries, like in Brazil, it was
Yeah.
that kind of
That's right.
situation as well. When
Yeah.
Bolsonaro lost the election, he was ready for a coup
Yeah.
with the support of the military. The four branches of the military, three of them said, no, we're not. We're not. Only the Navy said we'll go along with it, right?
Yeah.
But then the three others said no, and then it was like a lost game.
Yeah.
He didn't
Yeah.
have. So
Right.
that's the kind of calculations that are going on in those hours, right? Or maybe in the days leading up to it, because I'm sure Orban and Fidesz saw the writing on the wall here,
That's
because
right.
there was such a ground game, there was such a overwhelming support for the opposition.
Yeah.
But that's
No,
like
that's really
where it ends
helpful.
up,
Yeah,
right?
that's really
And as you
helpful.
say, in the United States, right, you have a president, as you said, that doesn't really have a good track record on accepting losing elections or accepting losing anything, which is part of democracy, right? That's
Yeah.
like at the heart of
At the
democracy.
heart of democracy. And I actually had friends at the end of 2024 who were kind of like, okay, our democracy held. I was like, the only reason the democracy held is because Trump won. If he had lost, I mean, and you can say democracy held whatever, I mean, we've been on the backsliding for so long. I want to say one kind of mean thing and get it out of my system because I'm that kind of person. But it was very interesting to me that J.D. Vance and Trump, while we're at an incredibly terrible war with Iran, and he's supposed to be negotiating with Iran, he goes to Hungary and uses that capital. And Trump's, basically dangles economic opportunity as a way of. This felt to me so crazy. And I mean, not crazy in the sense that I can't believe it, but crazy in the sense that that we're really like so blatantly interfering in an election. And it was so great because the press here, basically J.D. Vance has come out like having like not succeeded in the Iran talks and then doing this, like, and then all this stuff with the Pope. It's like everything he touches, like he's a failure at. I mean, it's actually kind of amazing given his aspirations for 2028.
It was also sort of kind of ironic that in his speech there in support of Orban, J.D. Vance accused the EU and European countries of meddling with the election.
Yeah. How amazing is that? Like how no sense of shame. He has a book coming out about his Catholic faith, and he has been at war with every pope that has existed while he's been a Catholic. So I don't know what that means. Anyway, I want to turn at this moment. We just mentioned some characters in the democracy, American democracy. But this, like, as listeners to the show know, like our whole show is about democracy, and it's where religion and democracy meet, and that's what we talk about every week with experts in the legal field and in the social scientist field and in the religion field, and talk about like the intersection of religion and democracy. When your report came out recently, it really landed hard. Like, and the headline, like, that we have fallen so far in the reality of our democracy, but also that we no longer actually counted as a liberal democracy. And I just would love for you to unpack that, because like that made it into all of my speeches and my sermons and everything that I was doing right away, because I thought, well, this is something that we need to start acknowledging, the threat to our country, especially in our 250th year as a democracy, So talk to me a little bit about that report. And when you started looking at the numbers, like what it looked like to you to see the United States continue this incredible slide.
Yeah, sure. So maybe I should say first to the listeners that V-Dem, Varieties of Democracy, we have 31 million data on democracy, human rights, judiciaries, parties and elections and so on. Essentially, for all countries in the world, going back to 1900, for a few countries, including the United States, we have data that goes back to 1789, right? So this is by far the largest data source on democracy and long-term trends and what's happening. So that's that, and it involves over 4,200 scholars and other experts from over 180 countries that sort of supply the raw data for all of this.
Up next, more with Staffan Lindberg. You're going to want to keep listening for his understanding of how religion functions in the ongoing struggle to maintain democracy. You can hear full episodes of The State of Belief anytime on our website at stateofbelief.com. You'll also find links to topics we discussed this week, as well as transcripts and more. You can also tell Alexa, Gemini, or Siri to play the podcast, The State of Belief, on any enabled device. Make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform. You're listening to The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet. Welcome back to The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President, Reverend Paul Brandeis Raushenbush. My guest is Varieties of Democracy Project founder Staffan I. Lindberg. V-Dem issues an annual report grading global democracies on in-depth and verifiable data points. This is not like Staffan kind of saying, you know what, today I'm feeling like this liberal democracy. No. This is like a huge survey, and that's really important to recognize, that this is not something done lightly, and it's done with really intense rigor.
Well, so the methods we use to then aggregate and process this raw data have been published in the top journals, scrutinized over and over, including by like the World Bank top economists to vet it so that they could use it. Like, do we trust this, and so on. So we've been vetted and tested also in terms of the rigor of the methodology. So what I think it means nothing, absolutely nothing, in terms of the ranking of United States or any other country, right? I've just been part of designing the methodology and run the project and involve all these scholars around the world. Now, based on all of that data, right, the United States decline in democracy now under Trump 2.0 is not only the largest regression on democracy in American history by far, it is also almost the most dramatic decline in such a short period that we have ever witnessed in a democracy. There is one instance. So if we disregard military coups, right? Argentina and stuff in the 60s. So if we disregard military coups and we disregard being invaded by something like Nazi Germany, just like this kind of autocratization or recession of democracy by an elected leader, the only instance that is really worse that has happened in a democracy was Hitler taking over in 1933 and going into 1994 very quickly did away with democracy completely. Right? Now, what has happened is really the checks and balances that are so central to the American republic as well as democracy are by a large degree gone, right? Congress has more or less abdicated its role. It's even the appropriation power, the power of the purse, right? If you take things like, doing away with USAID and essentially the Minister of Education and go down the line, the reducing spending and doing away with agencies that Congress has created with a law.
Right.
And the president just like, no, I don't like that. Scratch it. But it's a law. No, scratch it. Right. And then,
Even worse, if you're like, I know everybody, we have this memory of Elon Musk being given this power to destroy, departments that have been in existence for decades that were created by Congress. And he's up there with literally a chainsaw, like playing, I don't know what. Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to interrupt your flow, but I mean, this is just like, it's so etched in our memory, and it was so traumatic at the time to see what was happening, and yet no one was stopping it. That's what it felt like. It felt like, oh my God, someone is literally destroying our republic, who we never elected, who's just this richest guy in the world. I want to talk about money at some point, because that's also a corrupting influence.
yeah. But you could just look at it without even going into Elon Musk and Doge. Although, that's a sort of very special part of all this. But just look, the Constitution gives the power of the purse to Congress, not the president.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And Trump has, to a large extent, just taken over that power.
Yeah, 100%.
And the other core power of Congress is legislation, where the appropriation bill is a special piece of legislation, but legislation in broader sense. Now, Congress passed, as far as I could see, we could see 49 bills in 2025. That's like nothing. And 48 of them were on purely insignificant issues, like change the deadline for this national parks application, blah, blah. And one, the big, beautiful bill, so-called, was significant. Meanwhile, President Trump has issued legislation by way of presidential executive orders, 225 of them.
Yeah.
And on major issues, as you know, right?
Yeah.
So you've moved core powers from Congress over to the presidency along the unitary executive theory in Project 2025, right? And then in addition to that, you have he has managed to nullify much of the federal court system's power, right? So, there are over 600 court cases in the federal system right now against the Trump administration breaking laws and breaking the Constitution. When lower courts rule against Trump, they get insulted, intimidated, threatened with impeachment, and they get pizza doxings and so on, right? And then either the Trump administration appeals, or they just, if they are sure they're going to lose, then they just ignore it and continue doing what they're doing. And there are a series of rulings now of court contempt against the administration. And then,
No, we can go. The list is. The list is incredible. It's the attacks on the courts, the attacks on the universities, the attacks on even corporations that go against what he believes. It's really. I think one of the. First of all, like the question, I guess, that I have, and I do want to actually introduce religion into this, because that's my role. But I do want to say, when you fall from the definition of a liberal democracy, what does that technically mean? Like, because I think, like, you could, there's a slippery slope. But when you fall from one definition to another, what's the signifier there,
Yeah.
so that we can really understand, like, what was what just kicked us out of the party?
Yeah. And what kicked you out big time was what I was talking about right now,
Yeah, just the
because the liberal democracy, you
Yeah.
have checks and balances
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
function.
that's fine. Yeah,
And,
that makes sense.
and you would add to that the legislature holds the executive accountable
Right.
for actions that are illegal or inappropriate, or instances of corruption,
Yes.
instances of intimidation of actors of freedom in media or in civil society, and
Right.
so on. So, and then also that the courts uphold the laws in the Constitution, but also then the executive following those orders,
Yeah.
which apparently they don't.
Right.
So already that's why I went on some length at this, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
on those, so we have two indices with a bunch of indicators in each one of them. One for the legislature, independence, autonomy, and exercising that checks and balances, and the same for the judicial system then. And both of those are falling, like, big time in this year's measure. And the third part has a little bit to do with freedom of religion. It's part of it. It's individual rights and freedoms, and equality in front of the law in those being protected, right?
Yeah.
And so freedom of religion is falling among the indicators in this battery that measures individual rights. But you've had lots of infringements of individual rights with regards to protests. You should know that. Were you in Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
Twin Cities. And but also then a host of other instances, and now ICE using this face recognition, and then people being sought by police for watching protests and God knows what, right? And it's not only me saying this. Like, Human Rights Watch said in their latest report on the United States that the Trump administration is on a fast track to join the worst perpetrators of individual rights, human rights in the world.
Yeah.
And American Bar Association has issued several statements with concerns about the equality in front of the law, not the least the executive being acting without bounds, without constraints, breaking the law, and that being very concerning.
Yeah, all these things together. Plus, it's actually, in some ways, like listening to you talk, and we go through this and we remember it's like being boiled alive. Like the frog being boiled alive. You kind of, like, all of a sudden you realize, oh yeah. Plus, like, the attacks on the freedom of the press, the attacks on all of the, I will say, just like turning to religion, because this has been one of the most interesting things that we have been, Interfaith Alliance has been watching the attack on the freedom of religion, but also recognizing that actually the religious communities have been among the most brave in fighting back. When universities were caving, the Catholic bishops were saying no. The Lutheran bishops were saying no. All of these people in Minnesota, the faith community was part of that resistance, which actually yielded one of the most important defeats. My organization has sued the administration around the Religious Liberty Commission, which was made up of entirely of kind of Project 2025 right-wing Christians using religious liberty as this idea of a weapon of suppression, and we've actually, they're now winding down that because it's proved such a fiasco, and the anti-Christian And they formulated Pambondi in the first days, anti-Christian bias task force, which was another way of saying anybody who speaks against our kind of Christianity is going to be prosecuted. But we also sued about that, and I think that there is a way that religion, and you know this well, is that religion is one of those aspects of society. Either you can be a handmaiden to kind of the autocrat and say, yes, we want that proximity to power. You're going to give us that proximity, and our brand of religion is going to be ascendant and be able to be dominant. And then you have other kinds of religion, and right now you're seeing this incredible fight between Pope Leo and Trump, where Pope Leo is basically, I'm not afraid of you. I mean, it was such a great moment. Like, that moment was so good when he was just like, I don't care if you post on Truth Social against me and all this. I'm not afraid of you. And I think that we're seeing, in a lot of ways in America right now, like people kind of looking around and saying, okay, we don't have to accept this. But I do want you to say a little bit about how religion factors into democracy work as you see it.
Yeah, so it's a little bit dual, how religion factors. I mean, freedom of a religion is obviously a core right, freedom in a liberal democracy. And it is declining also in our measures under Trump 2.0. And you mentioned many potential reasons why it's declining, and we could mention others. So if you look at it, it's there. So in that sense, like it's a core attribute of liberal democracy to have freedom of religion. So it sort of goes up and down with democracy. Then in the current period, the world has sort of gradually come into this wave of autocratization around the world, and now the United States is part of it. And it's been 25 years of this wave building. In this wave, religion has been many places instrumentalized for autocratization. So if you allow just a couple of minutes here. So what has these past 25 years, most places, like overwhelmingly, this wave is driven by parties and leaders and movements that are far right, nationalist, and reactionary, and then anti-liberal, and many of them anti-democratic. Now, many of them, not all, but many of them have liaised with whatever is the most sort of conservative, reactionary brand of the dominant religion in the country. So one of the first things Putin did in 98 when he took over was to liaise with and get cozy with the Russian Orthodox Church and the patriarch there, who's insanely conservative, right? And who would also be nationalist and support that project of creating a narrative of our great heritage and our great nation that we used to be, that we need to resurrect. And of course, the country is falling in shambles unless Putin and I, the patriarch, we get our way and can save the country. That's sort of the narrative they all drive. Now, in Modi's India, it's Hindu nationalism and a very conservative, very reactionary brand of Hinduism together with nationalism to build this great Hindu nation again, right? And then attack the Muslims and the rest. In Orban's Hungary, although now turning around, but in Orban's Hungary, I mean, Orban, who used to be once a very, at the face of it, liberals, almost socialist, and on the barricades in the 90s, he suddenly became a Christian, a very Orthodox Christian, allied with the church and it became that Christian nationalist reactionary. In Erdogan's Turkey, He then cultivated close bonds with a very conservative wing of the Islamic community in Turkey, very reactionary, uh, in what used to be a very liberal Muslim dominated country, right? And Bolsonaro then tried to copy Trump to go with the sort of far right evangelical
Yeah, yeah,
churches
right.
and form an alliance there. And Trump did it with the abortion issue and all that, right? And he holding the Bible. He tried to look like Jesus the other day. That backfired. But this is a general trend. Like, this is how they operate, right? If you can merge religion in there and sort of claim almost being ordained by God to save the country and recreate a big nation, then people love it, right? Or a portion of the people will love it, and that's dangerous. So religion has been instrumentalized, but depending on context, different religions, of course, and different against others, and so on. Um, uh, so religion can be, in terms of democracy, democratization, in terms of autocratization, it can be this double-edged sword, right? And we've seen that in the past, in the history as well. Um, with the Catholic Church for a long time was with many dictators, and then turned around in the 60s. So it's a double-edged sword. It can be used to oppress people, and it has been used to oppress people, different versions of different religions. But you also see in many cases of democratization where churches are mobilizing people and helping support and organize and for freedom, and then being liberal in the original sense, which was in theology, liberal towards different denominations and different beliefs, and that's fine. But freedom of religion, along with other freedoms, is an essential part of our society. So churches and religion can also be a
Yeah,
force for
yeah.
democracy and for good,
I
obviously.
mean, that's you've kind of described the origins of the organization I had, Interfaith Alliance, which is basically was founded in the 90s to counteract like the oversized influence of the Christian Coalition with Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell, Ralph Reed, who were kind of trying to say we are, and they're still trying to say it. We are a Christian nation. Christians have a privileged position here. We are, going against the First Amendment, and so that's exactly what we do to organize. I would love to cure everything within about 2 minutes. So
Mhm.
could you do that for us, please? We can create a meme of you as the great healer, the Jesus Christ figure, and coming in just like Trump. You diagnose the problem. What do you, as with all of your expertise, what do you think are like maybe the 5 things to keep in mind about like how to turn around a democracy that is sliding and turn it into something that, really turn this around so that we can actually realize the promise of democracy in the United States?
Yeah. I'll keep it short. We know from studying these other U-turn cases, the Brazil, the Poland, and so on, Zambia and South Korea a couple of times now. A few things are really critical. The political opposition, whether factions of one big 10 party like you guys have, or a multi-party system, the pro-democratic forces need to unify.
Uh-huh.
They need to work together and say,
That
okay,
was a
we have a
lesson that they really talked about in Hungary. Is
yeah,
that this coalition did not agree on everything.
no, 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 no,
They specifically came together for this moment because they saw the common thread. But that was not like, everybody was agreeing on every single thing, and they
no,
couldn't.
no, 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 no. It's and the same with civil society in Hungary, whatever is left there. But like, and a lot of voters who voted for Peter Magyar said, like, did it holding their nose kind of thing, because they think he's too conservative, too right.
Right.
The same in Brazil. Many voters were not in favor of Lula, but they voted for him because there was a coalition of 9 parties behind Lula. Same in Poland with Donald Tusk, a coalition of 9 parties from far, pretty conservative right, to pretty far out left, but saying, hey, okay, we have our differences. We want different things in some, but now we need to save democracy
Right.
and get together. And then, secondly, the political and then civil society getting together and creating a really strong ground game. Like, get out there in middle-sized towns, in small towns, villages, like countryside, work it for a long time to really mobilize and create pressure and get enough, that overwhelming number of people, share of the population, go to vote and vote against the autocratizing incumbent so that it becomes really hard to stay in power. So those are critical components. Now, there's one thing that maybe doesn't look so good for the United States in this, that because the third thing would be that the court system stands up, right? They refuse to bend over. They refuse to rule in favor of this autocratizing government, um, and stop them in their tracks as much as they can, and hold up the integrity of the elections. They did that in 2020. Will they do it again now with the midterms? Who knows? And then, of course, the police, the paramilitary forces you now have with DHS and ICE, and eventually the military. You already had and have Marines on the streets. That's not a good sign. So you want those to be on the side of democracy and on the side of the protesters, not the other way around. Or at
Yeah.
least stay neutral, like stay back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we have the worst of the worst, who's the head of the military right now, who is a total Christian nationalist and anti-democratic, like just nightmare in Pete Hegseth. Listen, last question which we're asking everyone, which is like, we talk about courage on this show a lot. Like, what does courage look like when you're trying to show up for democracy as an individual? Like, we can talk about the people should do stuff, but it does come down to individuals deciding to show up. Like, what does courage mean to you when we're talking about democracy?
Yeah, courage would mean for people like me in academia in the US to stand up and speak truth to power. Uh, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of that, to my disappointment. Um, Courage for ordinary people would mean, if you work in the federal administration, a lot of people do, and you're asked to be bending or breaking the laws and regulations and do illegal things, you don't. Following orders is not an excuse, right? Civil courage means standing up, and then it means, if you're not working in the federal, it means also speaking out in daily conversations. Don't accept these norms to change, and the conversation being overtaken by those who will derail democracy even further. And when there is need for it, do what they did in the Twin Cities: get out there in protests. Not like no kings once every 6 months, right? It needs to be 6 months every day, kind of thing. When push comes to shove.
The Varieties of Democracy 2026 report, Unraveling the Democratic Era, is available for free download at v-dem.net. And we'll link to it at thestateofbelief.com. That's stateofbelief.com. Staffan, these are such important insights. Thank you so much for being with us on The State of Belief.
Thank you for having me.
Who do you know who would get a lot out of this discussion with Staffan I. Lindberg? Please share The State of Belief with them and be sure to subscribe to The State of Belief on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform. We need your help to keep growing The State of Belief, so if you get a lot out of this program, please make a financial contribution today at stateofbelief.com. That's stateofbelief.com. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of Religion News Service or Religion News Foundation. A big shout out to Out Loud Studios in New York City and the entire team there for hosting us this week. The State of Belief is produced by Ray Kirstein and is a production of Interfaith Alliance. Become a member today at interfaithalliance.org. We look forward to seeing you as a part of Interfaith Alliance. And be sure to join us next week. I can't wait. Until then, I'm Paul Brandeis Raushenbush on The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.